All right, Claire, I'm pressing start now.
Good morning and welcome to the meeting of Sherwood Forest Public Board. I'm delighted to open our board meeting for October. Don't know where this year has gone already. I've got apologies from Neil Gossage and from Dave Selwyn. Those are the only apologies I'm aware of. Any declarations of interest I should be aware of? None. Okay, none advised. Perhaps we can go to the minutes of the last meeting, which have been previously circulated, and those were approved. Okay, nothing there on that. Matters arising. Any matters arising? No matters arising indicated from that, and there's nothing on the tracker for it. I've got additional apologies that I'd forgotten about, sorry. We've also got apologies from Lorna as well. No, if you could just use the chat, please, to confirm approval of the minutes for governance purposes, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much. In terms of the action log, I don't think there's anything there at the moment on the action that isn't already covered in our minutes or our on our agenda for today. On to the chair's report. Well, obviously we've got quite a lot of change this month, with both Richard leaving us last month and Paul taking over as our interim chief executive. So welcome, Paul, in your new capacity. And as a consequence of you stepping up, we are also welcoming Rich Mills to the board in the role as Director of Finance, Interim Director of Finance. So welcome, Rich. Good to see you. And as part of that change, this will be the last meeting, sadly, of Tim Reddish. And Tim has been a non-exec director and is our SID, our Senior Independent Director. He joined us in November 2013, and he's been on a very long journey with this trust during some challenging times. I'm pleased, though, that he's with us today, and Tim, I don't know whether you want to take an opportunity in this part of the meeting to just say a few words.
Thank you, Claire. As people know, I never miss an opportunity to say anything. So firstly, I think that this organisation is a fantastic organisation. It's had an incredible journey, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to understand where you are before you can move on. And I've been privileged to be part of that journey because we took a while to understand where we were so we could move on. But part of me is disappointed that I'm moving on. And the reason I'm moving on is because I have other challenges and work-life balances, and it's nothing that is pushing me away other than the fact that there are things I want to get involved with in other areas around the disability inclusion agenda and things. So I've enjoyed my time here, and the one thing I have done is I've learned an awful lot, and I'm a better person because of being associated with you, Claire, and the colleagues, both executive and non-executive. And most of all, the people I've enjoyed being around the most are actually our patients and also the volunteers that we have that support all our great staff. So thank you for the great experience I've been involved with for the last 8 years.
Thanks, Tim. We're really going to miss you, and we're all already missing Pip because we haven't had an opportunity to see Pip, your guide dog, on site for some time. But hopefully we will get an opportunity to see you before you officially leave us. And thank you for everything that you've done for this trust and the contribution that you've made. And you really have brought so many issues to the agenda that I don't think we had previously thought of, or this trust had been able to consider, and you've opened our minds to different ways of thinking about issues, and we're very grateful to you for that. Thank you. So as you will see from the Chair's report, that also means, just to highlight, that there are 2 vacant posts now for non-exec directors, and we're in the process of recruiting for non-exec directors, and I would encourage members of the public or who qualify and are suitable, or anybody else that they may know, to look at the information for the vacant post of non-exec director. Okay, can I move on to the Chief Executive's report? So I'm going to hand over now to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And just to finish off the round of introductions, just want to welcome you to your first meeting as substantive chair for the Trust. We're really looking forward to working with you in that new role. And I just want to make reference to the fact that I'm proud and privileged to be in this role, and thanks to everyone who's offered their support and congratulations. And I certainly will do my best for patients and for supporting our colleagues. You mentioned Rich, so welcome, Rich. He's ready for this step up, and he's been pushing me for a while now, so I'm looking forward to his support as the Chief Financial Officer. Just turning to my report, just by way of update. Our hospitals remain busy. Our emergency attendances have returned to the levels that we saw pre-pandemic, and our admissions on the non-elective pathway are higher than they were before the pandemic. With 37 COVID patients in our beds and 5 on critical care, and critical care remains in a surge. Staffing remains a challenge, and will no doubt be further constrained as we enter the winter period. There's no doubt that our colleagues are feeling fatigued, and we had a conversation at the exec team yesterday on how we might support them better, ensuring that there's a manageable workload and that there are appropriate staffing levels in place. We're working really hard to reduce the number of patients waiting for treatment, and our elective activity has returned to near those levels that we saw before the pandemic, and in August they were at 99% of those levels, which is really pleasing. Just lastly, just mention 3 things from the report. It was our civility conference last month, really important work, and understanding how we can support each other with kindness and respect. Our staff survey launched this week, and we know the importance of encouraging staff to have their say. And in our equality, diversity and inclusivity development, I'm really pleased that our lead role has become substantive, and we just must make a note and be aware that October is Black History Month, so there'll be events that we can take part in. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. I don't see any specific questions from the board to you, so perhaps we can move on then to Claire and the update on COVID vaccinations.
Hi, thanks Paul, Claire. Morning everybody. I'm Claire Teeney, Director of People. This is the regular report to the board on the COVID vaccination programme. We have now officially started phase 3 of the programme, which includes the booster jabs for eligible people, and also the rollout to 12 to 15-year-old school children as well. That started earlier this month. Whilst we're in phase 3, what I would like to say is that for anyone that hasn't yet received their first or second jab that is eligible, they can still take that up, and at the hospital hub they can drop in to receive that. They don't need to book if that's the case. So it's just to make that point. So we are now open for phase 3. We commenced that on the 17th of September here at Kings Mill. We were in the lucky position to be able to open up the hospital hub for booster vaccinations ahead of the wider national programme, because the national booking system hadn't yet gone live, but we did open up the hospital hub because we got vaccine supply and were ready and knew that people were eligible. And it was really well received, particularly by colleagues at Sherwood. Those people that were eligible post 6 months from their second jab did turn up in earnest, and it was good to see the hospital hub thriving again and really busy. And colleagues down there were really pleased. They'd had a bit of a lull since the early phases of being busy, so they were glad to see patients coming back through. So that was good to see. We are underway with that, and as I said, across Nottinghamshire we've also commenced, and from a Sherwood Forest perspective we are supporting the schools immunisation programme that is taking place in schools. Started last week, and to date we have vaccinated 5,000 school children, and comparatively speaking, if we look at the regional figures, that is a really good figure. It's really good progress that we've made on the schools immunisation programme to date, so we're pleased with that. In terms of receiving a COVID vaccination and a flu jab, you don't need a gap between them. There was some talk of having 7 days or 5 days. You don't need that gap, so we're encouraging colleagues to get both their booster and also their flu vaccination. I can't give you a figure yet to date on the number of staff that have received their booster because the immunisation record isn't fully up to date yet, but hopefully I'll be able to bring something through to the next board. What our data tells us is that the majority of colleagues will be eligible for their booster towards the end of this month and the beginning of November. So that's when we should see an increase as well in those figures. I'll pause there, Claire, in case there are any questions. Other than that, I'll take the report as read.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Yes, Andy.
Claire, it was just a quick query on the medical staff vaccination rate, which seems to have gone up from memory from previous data that we've been shown. Do we understand why that is? Is it junior doctors that we don't know their status, or?
I don't think there's anything particularly, Andy. There was a bit of a churn with the data to start with juniors moving around, so having had one and then not necessarily being on our ESR records because of rotation and everything else. So that could well have had an impact on the figures. I would say that's probably the only thing really. Overall, the response rate from staff, whilst we've still got some hesitancy, but comparatively speaking, in terms of how long it took us to get an increase around flu uptake, for example, the response to colleagues taking up the COVID vaccination has been really good. And I think that there was a reflection of that when we opened up the hospital hub again for people to receive their boosters. It didn't take much prompting for staff of all categories to go down and if they're eligible receive it. So I think that's quite encouraging across the board. Still a bit of work to do, but generally a good response from staff all round.
That's helpful, Claire. So I guess some assurance on that number in the next 3 or 4 weeks would be helpful, so we can see that it's not real, if you like, it's an artifact.
Yeah. The final point to make as well, Andy, is as we do a final rub, the thing that we've learned about the data is if you take the immunisation record and you take an ESR record, if there's one thing that doesn't align, like a number in a postcode, for example, then actually it shows someone as unvaccinated when actually they are vaccinated. So as a manual exercise, we continue to rub all of that through as well, but it does take a bit of time. So it's quite detailed work. So that might also be just a lag in some of the data reporting.
Helpful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on the vaccinations? No, I think that's fine, and thank you very much, and thanks to the team. They've been brilliant, and as you say, I went down to have a look as well, and they were so enthused by being able to get back into business after the lull, and we've got some extraordinary people working in our hub now, people who were discussing with me that they want to stay. They've enjoyed it so much. They've come as vaccinators because their previous career has been frozen or furloughed or whatever, and they were so keen to stay with us because they welcomed the opportunity to get involved and with such a great team. Thanks, Claire. Okay, so moving on then to item 8, strategic priority maternity update, and it's over to Julie Hogg.
Thank you. So I'll take the perinatal surveillance scorecard first, if that's all right. So we've added the spontaneous birth rate to this following feedback from the board, and it was 62% in the month of August. Our major obstetric hemorrhage rate went up by 1, and that is just in the amber this month. We continue to implement the care bundle that we're piloting as part of the national process, and work with Nottingham and UCLH continues, although we do seem to perform quite well compared to both of those organisations, although they do have a higher risk population. The friends and family test is down at 88% recommendation rate again. We are continuing to increase the response rate, but we've also increased visiting in the last week, and we're confident that increasing access to partners will help us to increase that recommendation rate going forward. We've had 1 Cqc inquiry a month, and this related to social distancing and infection prevention and control practice on the ward area, on the maternity ward. We've responded to that promptly and not received any further follow-up, and the infection control team are supporting us with enhanced monitoring in that area. There were no maternity unit closures in August, although I think it is worth noting they have had a really busy September. And although there were no closures in August, there were times when we have requested support from other units, but they've been unable to support us. And just a note, you've got a paper later about the home birth service. Happy to take any questions on the perinatal surveillance scorecard, and then I'll move on to the safety champions update.
I'm not seeing any questions there, Julie, if you want to move on.
Okay, so just a couple of highlights from the next report. So Claire and I, as the board safety champions, continue our monthly walkarounds, and we have the virtual maternity forum, which has been widened to include anaesthetic and theatre staff this month. We've received the NHS resolution guidance for this year. So this is the programme that is around maternity safety and attempting to reduce clinical negligence claims. We had, for the Saving Babies Life bundle, we were fully compliant last year, but we did have 1 derogation around ultrasound practice. We've received notice that we will need to be compliant with that this year, and the teams are working that up. The continuity of carer programme, we booked 21% of women onto a continuity of carer pathway, and that's in line with the trajectory that we've provided to board. And we've also increased the number of women from an ethnic minority booking on a continuity of carer pathway to 15%. So that's a 10% in-month improvement. From the virtual forums and the walkarounds that we've been doing, the key themes from staff remains staffing. I think it's fair to say we have struggled over August with annual leave, some additional maternity leave, and then sickness, and that has depleted our numbers. We've got a really strong pipeline of newly qualified midwives, but we know that we have to support them well when they come into practice, and we've received some regional funding for a senior midwife to support those newly qualified midwives into a registrant role. And there are no external incidents to report. Happy to take any questions on that one.
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment on that, just some comments about this being good improvements considering some of the staffing capacity challenges. So no particular questions, Julie.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to strategic priority 3. And it's back to you again, Claire.
Thanks, Claire. So this report is here to provide the board with some assurance around the work that we've started in terms of strategic workforce planning. We have had a more detailed discussion around this at the People, Culture and Improvement Committee, and we'll continue to do so, but I wanted to give the board direct line of sight of some of the work that we've got underway. I think it's fair to say that we've been in a bit more of a reactive position around our workforce and fill in some of our gaps and live in a bit more in the moment. And the work that we've started is to give us a bit more of a forward look so that we can take the decisions that we need to today to make sure that strategically within the next 3 to 5 years, we do have the workforce capacity and capability that we know we'll need to continue to run the services that we've got. So the report sets out the methodology around that and some of the modelling that we have done. It also indicates some of the known gaps, taking into account some of the attrition rates and our usual recruitment uptake, and it shows our churn. So it factors in some of what that we will need. There is more work to do. There's some specific detailed work that's going on, particularly around our medical workforce. So there will be a subset of detailed information to an overall strategic workforce plan that we've got to do, and we will continue to review this on a 6-monthly basis, and we'll take through the detail at the committee. But I wanted to just flag to the board that it is work that we have commenced, and just to provide a level of assurance that actually at a more medium to longer term look, we are doing some of that detailed work so that we can take the right investment decisions where we can around training, development, apprenticeships, those sorts of things, to bring in the skill set to sort of future-proof us going forward. There's nothing more in terms of the detail that I was going to go into here, but happy to take any questions. And as I say, we did give it quite a rub through at the last committee meeting.
Thank you very much. OK, I've got a question from Barbara.
Morning. Thanks very much, Claire. So really, I suppose I was quite stunned by the gap in workforce by the end of this time frame. You know, 400 plus whole times equivalents is quite something to try and plug that. And I really wanted to get a better understanding about what work was going on to bring new people into our workforce, people that might historically have not come in through a nursing or AHP or medical route. So roles such as physician associates that might be taken up by people who have a science background, and those sorts of people, the sort of, for me, the untapped potential of those graduates.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. That's a really good question. So this isn't just about doing the like for like, which is why I said I think there's a bit more work to do. A number of things. One of the first things is that we are engaged with the local universities, particularly the universities in Nottingham, around supporting the curriculum development and what that can mean then in terms of entrance into jobs, and thinking about how we use the skill set quite differently. Nottingham Trent, particularly in the last couple of years, have really come on board with that, so they weren't in the space of particularly seeing themselves as a feeder university around either sciences and also direct nursing jobs as an example, and they've developed a whole curriculum working with ourselves around that to help facilitate that. So that's some of the work that's already underway locally, engaging key partners around that work as well. Some of the other things that we've described are about attracting people that have perhaps never thought about working in a healthcare setting. Claire articulated a really good example of some of the things that's come through as a consequence of the pandemic and the vaccination programme. They are good byproducts of a bad set of circumstances, really, and that we are continuing to nurture that. We have got a number of people that are joining us as well at an entry level. So we host at Sherwood the Care for Knots programme, which is the work experience and apprenticeship programme, which works directly into schools and the higher education colleges to actually articulate to people what careers and other opportunities that there are within health. So we're doing a number of things on a number of different fronts. And we've also sponsored a number of direct apprenticeships, both for nursing degrees and nurse associates as well. So I think there's a whole range of things that we are doing, but I do think there's a bit more thought that needs to go into what we do, at what level, how much we invest where, which is the whole purpose of starting to get into this more strategic conversation, so we can take a better forward look around that. I think the final thing to say, and we've talked about some of the untapped markets, it's we as health organisations, we have a lot of career opportunities as well that are in non-clinical settings, so for finance, procurement, HR, all of those sorts of things which people don't often realise or assume. So it's important that we don't forget those as well. And I'm particularly keen that we take the opportunity to encourage people from underrepresented communities as part of the whole health inequalities piece that might not think about careers in health because actually their friends and family don't work in those sorts of settings. I think there's some really, we have a responsibility, but there's some, you talked about some of the untapped skills and untapped markets. I think that there's a huge opportunity for us there to both play a role corporate, in terms of corporate social responsibility, but also for a win for ourselves in terms of the local labour market that I don't think we've maximised the potential of yet. I'll pause. See, Julie wants to come in as well, Claire.
Yeah, sure. I've got quite a few actually of the board. I know Paul wanted to come in and comment.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment about supporting this approach. We really need to be able to take a look forward, as we've just discussed all the reasons why, so I won't rehearse those, but I'm also mindful that in the past, and this is not just at this trust, this is widespread across the NHS. If you talk to a regulator, there's been a lack of triangulation between capacity, finance and workforce planning in the annual planning process. So these sort of things we can really look forward and into the future, get these plans aligned and really have that triangulation as we move forward to planning future capacity and future financial planning as well. So yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Paul. Simon.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to similar point to Paul, really. So I really welcome this. I mean, it's been a week where there's been a lot of talk about leadership of the NHS, but leadership will take you so far. If you don't have enough colleagues on the shop floor to do the work, then you're not going to get too much further. So I think it's really important to see this now and to see a bit more of a strategic approach to it. I agree with Paul's point that we need to better link this with capacity and understand how our workforce fits with the capacity that we might need for the future. And then my question really, Claire, was more about the universities and how sort of like tied in they are to all of this, because actually we need people starting now, because then they're going to be ready in 4 years, and are the conversations going on with universities around workforce?
Claire, before you come in on that, I probably just ought to say I had a meeting with Notts College, North Notts earlier, West Notts College earlier in the week as part of their association with Nottingham Trent University, and we're very keen to work together and continue the work that you've been doing, but we're also discussing how we deepen that relationship in terms of planning for additional courses. So I think they've reached out to us because there are further opportunities to do something. Claire?
Yeah, so I think the universities are really on board. I think that they recognise the opportunities for them. I think it was quite interesting. If I roll back a few years, Nottingham University, for example, on a nursing front, were reducing their school of nursing, just as an example. If you roll back 3 or 4 years, and Trent stepped into the space, and now the two have come together actually to say, how do we work? How can we work together? And I just use that to illustrate an example. I think that we are onboarding locally. increase numbers of the right people, and here, Simon, at Sherwood, we are sponsoring a number of degrees, as are other health and care providers across the patch as well. So I do think those people are starting now, but that said, I think there is more to do, and there is a bit more creative thinking about the other qualifications that people are already undertaking, and how actually those people, when they graduate, could indeed work with us in roles that they might not have considered when starting their initial qualification. And I think that's some of the work that we've got to do with the university, with those people that are already taking qualifications there. But I think that we're in a good place. I think we're in a good place locally around that, which is helpful. And I've mentioned the Nottingham universities. It's the same in terms of our links with Derby, Leicester, and looking north as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Andy, you've got a question.
Thanks, Claire. So that's a really good description, Claire. So your point about non-clinical stuff is really important as well, because I think there's a real opportunity there. But I guess you've described the local measures we can take, and you've talked about coordinating across the different universities, but clearly for some of this it needs coordination at system level, and I know that you've been involved in that. I just wonder if you could update where we've got to at system level in terms of trying to get a proper supply of the workforce that we need.
Thanks. So this afternoon there's a ICS board development session on the very subject of workforce. Pick up that point that Paul made, really, about how we get into a better place about our organisation and triangulation on the money, the quality and workforce capability and capacity. And there are some proposals going forward about the way that we operate at a system level in shadow form from January that are going to be discussed this afternoon. So hopefully they'll be well received and we can start to better organise ourselves around that. I think in the first instance, there's more work that we can do. We've already started it, but we can formalise, particularly through a provider collaborative arrangement. I think that's where some of our key strengths lie. And just to provide some further assurance, on the way into work, I had a conversation with my counterpart at NUH on the very subject, really, about how we can step into a space as a provider collaborative to really combine some of the activity that we do. So we're not competing for the same people, but actually we attract, recruit and retain the best to Nottinghamshire to provide the better overall services. And I think that actually between ourselves, NUH and Notts Healthcare, we're in a strong position and already working quite closely on that. And I think that we'll get better on it. We've done some joint work already around maternity, for example. But I think that there's a real opportunity now and a willingness for us all to do that in a much more joined up way.
Okay, great. Manjeet.
Can you hear me? I think I'm all
yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you both, Claires. And I was going to say, you know, that workforce capacity is one of the biggest risks as far as the people risks are concerned, both presently and the future. And I was actually going to ask the question Andy's asked, but I'll ask another question. But what I did want to say first of all was thank you to Claire and her colleagues such as Richard Cottrell and so on for all the work they've done on the analysis, because resources being scarce, you know, it's so important we get the right data to be able to focus our action in the right areas. And you know, this piece of work has been really valuable, and at People Committee we are receiving ongoing reports on that. My other question now, Claire, was about retention. I wondered what sort of interventions and mitigations we may be seeing around retention, both at the trust and at that system level, and whether we could discuss this further when we discuss actions at People Committee.
Thanks, Manjeet. So yes, we can pick that up. From a Sherwood perspective, overall our turnover rates are relatively good. I think that the thing that we're concerned about more broadly in the NHS is the level of fatigue that people are feeling right now, and the levels of morale that we've got. And actually, we are worried across the board about people leaving and or taking retirement early and not returning. So that's something that we are very conscious of and are trying to mitigate. But it is a factor, and it is a factor of concern for us. I think one of the things that we can get better at around that is where people do want a change or do want to do something differently, rather than leaving for good, that actually we support people to continue in work in some capacity. And if it's not here within the organisation, that is also a system opportunity, so that we retain good skills across the board for the greater good. And that comes into the work that we can do better around collaboration. But more than happy to pick up those conversations, as we will do as part of the onward discussions at the committee around the workforce plan.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. And Julie, you had a comment you wanted to make as well?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on Claire's point around Nottingham Trent University. So I think we're beginning to establish a really special relationship with them. Our registered nurse apprenticeships, this is the first cohort we've ever done. They've started with Nottingham Trent, and actually overwhelmingly the feedback is most of those students wouldn't have been able to do this course without Trent not offering it in Mansfield. So they're all local, want to stay in Mansfield. So we're going to have a really strong pipeline of future nurses from that. And we've also got 40 trainee nurse associates in the pipeline as well. So that's 70 new apprenticeships this year for nursing. I'm also putting some pressure on for midwifery, because I think nationally the picture will emerge that there is a much bigger gap than we thought there was within midwifery services. So Nottingham Trent are helping us get ahead with that as well. And just to pick up on the retention point, the Pathway to Excellence programme is all about creating the right practice conditions for nurses and midwives to flourish. So that will be a key part of our retention programme, because it's all right getting trainees to the point where they're qualified, but the difficult bit is getting them through their preceptorship safely and getting them to want to stay at Sherwood. And I'm confident that that programme will support us with that transition as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks, Julie. I think it's a really positive report, which gives us a sense of what the future could look like, and also links into the partnership building that we're really keen to do in the community, as well as building our workforce. So thank you very much for that, Claire. Moving on now to our next item. Item 4, which is the strategic priority 4 to continuously learn and improve. And I think we've been joined by Terry Ann, who's going to take this paper, I think. I can't see her on the screen again now. Have we got Terry Ann on the screen?
Terry Ann she's in the meeting, but I'm not sure. She might need to turn her microphone and camera on.
Okay. Terry Ann is going to talk to us about the research and development, the quarterly performance report. But I can't see her on the screen at the moment, and I can't hear her at the moment. Is there any of the executives who are responsible for this as a starting point? Julie?
Yeah, I can see Terry Ann on here, but happy to try and provide as much of an overview as I can. So essentially the research programmes look very different over the last year, and you'll see from the numbers that most of our, in fact all of the non-COVID research was paused, and that significantly affected the recruitment numbers, but we've still done very well. We've recruited over 620 participants to research. Oh, here we go, Terry Ann.
Terry.
I am here. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening with my computer. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you. And
Am I
we can
coming-
see you. We can see you now, Terry Ann, as well.
You can see me. I still can't see you. I can't apologise enough. I have been here from 9 o'clock, I promise.
I know you have, because I saw you come onto the screen. Don't worry, it's technology. I know you were in there somewhere.
I was like, it's the first time I've ever done this, and it couldn't go more wrong, I'm sure.
Listen, don't worry, you're fine, you're here, and we're really pleased that you are, and I'm sure you've got a great presentation for us. So
Okay.
over to you, Terry Ann.
You can see me because I have no idea what you can see.
We can see you. We can also see your slide deck, which starts off with Research and Innovation Q2 Performance Report 20.
Okay, lovely. Sorry, Julie. I'll make a start now anyway. So as we enter Q3, we have made significant progress in opening all our original portfolio studies that were unfortunately had to be closed down during the COVID. So we've now successfully opened all of our studies, with a lot more studies in the pipeline as well. So our portfolio is gradually building up again, thankfully, because we was concerned that this may not have been able to be built up, but it is. And so if we go on to the next slide, please. Hello?
Yes, sorry, next slide's come up.
All right, okay. So if you can see from the performance graph in the top left, the red line is us as where we are at the moment. So it was agreed with the medical director that we would set our research target in Q2 due to the instability of the research portfolio. We have now set that at 1,200, which is significantly lower than previous years. But again, this is due to the instability of the impact of COVID. But we are on target to meet the 1,200, and if we do feel we can achieve it and go above and beyond, we will increase that target. But at the moment, it does still remain at 1,200. So what the target is based on is our portfolio research, and we are still also working on the urgent public health studies as well. So we're running 2 lots of studies at the moment. So our staff are, it's pretty much a drop and go basis. So they're working tirelessly on their own studies, and then when we do get COVID patients, they have to leave their studies and go and try and recruit the COVID patients. And we feel like this is obviously going to be an ongoing thing for quite some time. So one of our strategic priorities at the moment is to try and balance this up. And all the data that is provided on it is from the cut-off date was the 27th of September. So recruitment is actually much better than that at the moment, but obviously we have to provide the data before. So next slide, please. So the CRN East Midlands income stands at 7,552 and 652. But I just want to point out for the commercial income at 81,470, that is not all ours. We have still got to distribute a large amount of that out to our support departments, so places like X-ray and pathology. And then we have the ongoing Department of Health funded at £20,000. Next slide, please. So we do our patient research experience, and actually we're one of the best in the East Midlands at doing this. So we've had 74 responses for September or in Q2, and like I say, we was one of the top in the East Midlands, and 89% of participants either agree or strongly agree that their participation in research has been valued, and 96% would consider doing it all again. So as you can see, there's some lovely comments down in the bottom, and these are fed back to the team on a regular basis. So I get this report every single month, and we've obviously got things to work on, but these are just 3 of the best comments that I picked out. Like I said, I fed back to the team. The main thing we are facing with things to work on are feeding back study results, but it's just not possible. We don't get all of the study results ourselves, but whatever we do get, we are trying to work on making sure patients are fed back that information. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, like I said earlier, research priorities. The main thing is we wanted to balance our urgent public health studies along with our portfolio studies at the moment. And another thing that is another priority that is slightly different to the last one, we're working in collaboration at the moment with primary care at Nottingham CCG. There's going to be a Band 7 post that goes out, possibly a secondment, and what they're trying to do is embed research more so within primary care. So they want somebody to go in, set the service up and train all the primary care staff so that they can keep that ongoing. It's not a full-time position or a permanent contract. It is a 1-year secondment. But hopefully we're going to get more of these things coming in. And then just to point out, there is a batch of studies coming through for antiviral, and we are going to be bidding for those because that is going to be the next chapter for research. So yes, we are currently looking at those and bidding for quite a few of those studies. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. So the other thing was the COVID overview. So I can't see it. I can't get my shared drive to work. The computer's just painfully slow. But what it does do, it gives you the amount of studies that we have recruited to over the COVID period, and it should tell you on there what studies we are still recruiting to, what studies have closed, and what studies are in follow-up. So the Siren Study is due to close in March. They did really want to extend this, but we just don't have the capacity to extend it. Plus, we're getting a lot of staff withdrawing from that study, so it wouldn't be worth us continuing the Siren Study. But we have just opened a new one. I don't think it's on there. It's Broome, which David Walsh is taking part in for rheumatology. We feel like this is going to be a really good recruiter, and hopefully that will help with our recruitment target as well. Are there any other questions?
Thank you very much, Terry-Ann. That is an extensive report on the research. It's really very good and positive for the trust. So thank you. I think we've got a comment from Julie, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you. Every time that Terry-Ann and colleagues attend board, we ask them what they need for support, and they talk about clinical research facilities. So since the last meeting, we have secured space for that, which is excellent news for the team, and they're just working through the works required to convert that into a clinical space. I also always ask about what we're doing for nursing, midwifery and AHP-led research. Alison Steele and myself had a really good meeting with Nottingham Trent again earlier this week, and both of us are committed to establishing some sort of centre that will support nursing, midwifery, AHP-led research in the future, and we hope to bring a proposal through board to seek support for that. So I think there's some really, really excellent stuff going on, despite kind of all the challenges that COVID has brought, particularly to the research world. They continue to progress their strategic direction quietly and confidently in the background. So thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a question from Andy as well, Terry-Ann.
Thanks, Terry-Ann. It's a really good report, and great to see the amount of COVID work that we've managed to get into as well. It's really good. It's probably not one to answer today, but as we think about health inequalities as we're recovering with the pandemic ongoing, one of the things that I've often considered is, do we know how our population in Mid-Not sits compared to a national benchmark or the wider Nottinghamshire population in terms of access to trials? I think if we're thinking about levelling up and health inequalities, that will be quite an important question for us to have some knowledge around. I've never seen any information, so maybe I can just leave that in the air for you to think about.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, Manjeet, you've got a question as well.
Yes, thank you, Terry, and that was really helpful and a good report to see the work. Terry, my question was about how, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Terry, my question was about how do we work at a system level, particularly with the provider collaborative or other trust colleagues on getting more value out of research?
I think Terry. No, you haven't, but I think Terry Ann may have frozen.
And I don't know whether one of the exec colleagues wanted to comment on that, maybe.
Julie, did you want to come in on this, or Paul? Yes, okay. Julie, Paul.
Julie, no doubt, add a little bit more colour, but in terms of Manjeet, in terms of directly in the provider collaboratives, research hasn't featured in those conversations as yet. But as we heard, Terry Ann gave an update on how we're extending our reach into primary care. So we sort of look at what is our research capability and what is our USP, and where we can maximise that. And we've looked at more locally, more local place-based initiatives to be able to expand into.
I think Terry Ann may be back with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. Did you hear that?
Terry Ann, did you?
You might be on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute, Terry.
It might be the system.
Oh yeah, it's the system.
I'm really sorry, Terry Ann, for this, because I know it's very stressful as a presenter, but you really have presented brilliantly for us today. So thank you so much, and really don't worry, it's not your fault that we're having such challenges. Stay on for the moment, at least then if you can hear the points that are being raised, and I'm sure your executive colleagues will pick things back up again if you can't get an opportunity to do that. Okay, don't worry. I think probably in the circumstances then, I don't have any other questions, and I know, Terry, you can hear me. Yes, you're acknowledging you can hear me. So thank you to you and your team for everything. We'll ask Julie to just pick up with you after this, any other points that have been made that you might have missed. And we look forward to seeing you again at a future board meeting. Julie, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, just going to say thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the patient story, and I believe we've been joined by Diane Ray. Hello, Diane.
And
have I got you? Okay, so I can still, just so you know, comms, I can still see Terry Ann on my screen as well as Diane, and that might be a bit confusing.
I'm not sure why, because Terry Ann's I've taken her off the live bit now. It should just be Diane on there now.
Well, I'm not sure what everyone else can see, but I can see you, Diane, but I can also see Terry Ann. So Diane, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us at the board today. And you've got a patient story for us, haven't you?
I have, yes. So this originated from a Never event which occurred, which is explained within the video. So I hope it provides a little bit of an insight into how we respond to Never events and what sort of the roles of different people are within those events.
Okay, thank you. Have you've got a presentation now? Great.
Reflections of a Never event, a patient's story.
Hello, my name is Diane and I work as a Quality Governance Facilitator. This is part of the Governance Support Unit. A large part of my role involves sharing learning across the organisation, and a lot of learning is generated from incident investigation and management. By looking at an incident from the perspective of the patient and family, and also taking into consideration the roles of those healthcare professionals involved in the investigation, we have a unique opportunity to examine the full impact and the true impact on the patient and on those family members. Within this patient story, we highlight a never event incident which occurred around positive patient identification. Never events are incidents which should never occur if all processes and procedures are in place and adhered to. This patient story relates to an incident whereby the patient had a procedure performed which was intended to be performed on a different patient. This patient's family have very generously consented for us to use their relative story in the hope that we can learn from it as an organisation. Some of the staff involved in this incident have kindly shared their experience and what their role was in the process to enable us to learn more fully and ultimately improve the patient experience. All patient identifying details have been removed from this patient story.
Reflections of the medical staff.
Hello, my name is Gupta, and I'm very grateful for having been given this opportunity to speak to you by the organizers of this meeting. The purpose of this brief video is to share my experiences from an incident that happened in July of 2020 with you. The incident was both educational and disappointing for me because I made an error which could have been easily prevented. So in July 2020, we as part of the rheumatology on-call team made our way to Gen Medical Ward to see a woman in her 80s who had been referred with a swollen, painful right knee. When we got to the ward, having checked on the internet and convinced ourselves that the patient was in bed number 2, there was indeed a lady of similar age and description lying in bed number 2 with a swollen right knee. Unfortunately, she was very deaf. We were advised to speak up by a nurse who was attending to a neighboring patient, and speak up we did, asking the patient if her name was so-and-so, and she answered in the affirmative. We did not check her identifier tags such as that on the wristband, and we did not cross-check with another person to make sure that we had obtained the right patient. Unfortunately, the junior doctor who normally looked after the patient was off the ward on lunch. We then proceeded to aspirate the knee. At this point, the junior doctor returned from lunch. At this point, we realized that we had obtained the wrong patient. The patient that we were supposed to see was in fact in bed number 4 and of almost similar age and obviously a female, so very similar description. We reassured the junior doctor that we would do an incident report and entered the mistake that we had made in the patient's notes. When I got back to my office, the first thing I did was fill in the incident form with a fairly thorough description of what had happened. That incident form was investigated by one of the managers and escalated to the trust committee. I had to obviously complete a couple of reports on that. I also called up the patient's nearest relative, which happened to be a daughter. I apologized to the patient's daughter, and thankfully she graciously accepted my apology. Obviously, the incident was an eye-opener for me as a consultant of more than 15 years, standing 12 years of which had been spent at a university hospital. This was completely unforgivable on my part. The errors that led to this incident were schoolboyish, to put it mildly, and any medical student would have realized the need to confirm the patient's identity before proceeding with an invasive procedure, but I did not do it. It could be argued that there was a litany of events which had conspired to cause the error, but that is no mitigation, unfortunately. So I'm only sharing this in the hope that you don't fall into a similar set of circumstances that befell me, and hopefully do the checks and balances which I should have done in preventing this error. Many thanks for listening to me and giving me an opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Reflections of the nurse in charge. It was a busy day, but no busier than normal. We didn't know that the doctor had been on the ward, The nurse would have escorted the doctor to the patient. I felt let down in a way. We are there for the patient and to protect them. This happened on my shift and I didn't know about it. It is important for feedback, even if it is not your division. Learning from incidents is important to share with ward staff. It improves things for patients and improves the experience for patients.
My name's Elaine and I work within the Clinical Governance Support Unit. My title is a Quality Governance Lead. Clinical governance is a system through which NHS organisations monitor and improve standards of care. We regularly look at risks, aim to reduce risks, investigate incidents and learn from these incidents. Each day we look at incidents that have occurred and been reported the previous day, and any that we feel need escalating we will escalate to senior members of staff. In this particular case we recognised the incident immediately the following morning and it was escalated accordingly. We go through a scoping meeting, which is the division, and this is then taken to a further senior level meeting, which is a trust scoping meeting. And it was at this trust scoping meeting that the incident was declared a never event. During this meeting, we identify a lead to take the investigation forward. And we also identify a duty of candor lead.
Duty of candor.
Duty of candor is a legal requirement we have to perform when any incident occurs that causes moderate or above harm to the patient. We also have to perform duty of candor for all never events.
In this particular case, the patient was deaf and unable to fully comprehend what had happened, so the duty of candor lead made contact with the patient's family and offered support.
They explained an investigation was taking place and had they got any concerns they wanted addressing within the final investigation. In this case they hadn't and they were quite happy for us to continue. Once the final investigation is signed off and complete, we offer to share the final report with the patient and or their families.
Learning.
Each investigation requires learning. Actions are allocated to leads and given a timescale. All actions have to be completed by this timescale, and before we close these actions we require evidence of closure. These are monitored regularly and escalated to trust if we are falling behind.
Patient experience and service improvement. Implementation of a written consent for aspiration procedure. Completion of a WHO 3-stage checklist. Audit of WHO checklist completion. We are undertaking a never event review.
As a result of this and other PPI incidents, we as an organisation have a duty and responsibility to learn from these incidents, to share that learning and to ensure that we as an organisation take positive action. We communicate important learning messages across the organisation in a number of ways. Learning matters and iCares detail incidents which may have occurred across the organisation where there are relevant learning points so that staff are able to read those communications and take action within their own departments. Ward leaders, matrons, department leaders, allied health professionals and divisional staff all receive incident updates on a monthly basis so that any relevant learning can be shared where applicable and disseminated to staff across the organisation. We have communicated important learning messages around positive patient identification within the last 12 months.
Various iCare emails that have gone out. Patient sampling poster, get it right first time.
We as an organisation recognise that learning is an ongoing and ever-evolving process and are fully committed to ensuring that we learn from incidents, we recognise the patient's perspective and we ensure that we do all within our power to ensure patients receive high standards of care. Every patient story affords us an opportunity of looking at how we process and manage incidents, keeping the patient at the heart and focus of all that we do. We are constantly striving to improve our processes, our communication and the way which we share learning and learn from incidents to ensure that we get it right first time, every time.
Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
I thought that was a really good approach, and Dr. Gupta's very honest sort of statement of what had happened and how he felt about it, I'm sure will be recognised by other members of staff as a genuine attempt to try and move our learning as an organisation forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions, and I'm seeing in the chat here references by Tim Reddish to the importance of brilliant basics. So Tim, perhaps if you want to come in a moment, I'll take Paul Robinson first, and then Tim, if you would like to come in.
Hi, thanks Diane, and thanks for that, and you know, I appreciate Dr. Gupta's openness and transparency there, and I just wanted to make a comment that openness and transparency displayed is key to this, and we recognise when incidents occur, both preventable and actually non-preventable. So we're open and honest about that. But the most important thing, and you picked it up in your presentation, is learn from them, learn from as a trust perspective, not just the individuals, but be able to disseminate that learning, so that we really make sure that with those incidents that are preventable don't happen again, and we give the best possible care to patients we can. And with that, I'll let Tim come in with his brilliant basics, because that's exactly what needs to underpin this. So thank you.
Thank you,
Tim.
Thank you. It's just from my own personal experience of one being an athlete and working with athletes and coaches and everything we do over the years. And the one thing that there are always something that breaks down or doesn't go quite right. And it's mainly things like complacency, muscle memory, human factors. But the one thing that addresses all this is the mantra of brilliant basics. And if we get all our basics right, then I wouldn't say such events like this would never happen, but it will mitigate them. But for me, it's just a mantra I've always implemented, one in life, but two, when working with elite athletes, well, any athlete really, because if you break down and don't get the basics right, the sexy stuff that you do afterwards will fail.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this presented a never event, but actually we can flip that on its side and say that we should have always events, and checking someone's wristband should be an always event. So that's something that I'm sort of keen to explore further in the future.
But what I will say is, on the flip side, I've been into the hospital and had treatment, and from arriving to having some minor treatment as a day patient, I was checked, including wristbands, over 20 times because I counted it.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tim. We've got a few other comments and questions that have come in from colleagues as well. Julie, you were next.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to Diane for kind of being brave and bringing this to us. It's a different type of patient story, and I think it's one that has really added value in the organisation and will do to the board as well. Diane's wearing 3 hats at the moment. She's very modest, but she's doing her governance role. She's a Chief Nurse Fellow, and she's also been redeployed to critical care. So thank you for pulling this together while splitting yourself in 3. You've done a brilliant job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. Emma, you wanted to come in.
Thank you for that, Diane, and just totally echo Julie's comments really as well. And what I just wanted to say is a big thank you to Diane and other colleagues who have been quite heavily involved in our learning and improvement community in Sherwood, particularly looking at how we do continue to create that culture of learning. So feeling safe, supported, and that it's okay to speak up when things just don't go right. Let's learn from them, and let's try to improve to give the best care for patients. So really value your input, Diane, and the rest of the teams in that. So just wanted to recognise that and say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those are all of the questions for you, Diane, but just to echo the comments that have been made across the chat from a number of the members of the board, to thank you and your colleagues for sharing this. It's very open, honest, transparent, and I know that those reflections will be really difficult for the people concerned, but you've by doing this, I'm sure that other patients will benefit, and those professionals will benefit as well from recognising the changes that need to be put into place. So thank you to you for all the work you're doing, and to your colleagues.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take a break now, quick comfort break, and return at 10:30. So thank you very much. We'll see you back on at 10:30. Welcome back. I think colleagues have returned now and we can continue with the rest of the meeting. So can I just check, Paul, are you back with us? Lovely, wonderful.
Yeah.
In which case, perhaps I can hand over to you to introduce colleagues to take us through the single oversight framework performance, please.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Claire. So this is the reporting period for the month of August, and we'll start with our People and Culture report from Emma Challens, our Director of Culture and Improvement.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. I would like to highlight 3 particular areas to notice from members of the board. One is relating to our quarterly staff survey. So in July this year, there was the restart of what was previously known as the quarterly pulse survey. And that is where there's a regular every quarter check-in with colleagues, what it feels like to work in the organisation, how we continue to take care of patients and ensuring that we support them in their well-being and development. After analysis of those results, I'm pleased to confirm that we sustain a positive experience and also the results of our last national staff survey, which took place at the back end of last year. We also added in this year an additional question to our quarterly survey, which focused on welfare and well-being. We wanted to ensure that we have a regular check-in to see if we continue to support colleagues in a helpful and impact way. Again, I'm pleased to say that colleagues have expressed that they do feel supported by the organisation. Areas where we can continue to improve are the areas that we're already continuing to focus on, which is around improving equality, diversity and inclusion across the organisation, continuing with visibility of managers and leaders across all of our hospital sites, and also in terms of behaviours of colleagues, so living our values and the behaviours that colleagues choose to take in line with that. So those are the results of that. I further wanted to recognise that, and Paula mentioned it earlier, this week on Monday the 4th, the national NHS staff survey went live across the whole of the country. And we are obviously participating in that, and we're taking a very supportive approach across all of our teams, areas and sites. And any engagement that we do, we're trying to ensure that we also do that in a way where we address welfare, well-being, anything further we can do to support colleagues. So we're taking a very supportive approach and ensuring that we're not impacting on colleagues delivering services to patients. So we will continue to do that over the next number of weeks, and that closes on the 26th of November. The final thing I'd like to make note of is our continued ambition, really, and our vision for continuous improvement in Sherwood. Some great presentation earlier from Diane with regards as being a learning organisation, and our vision really is about ensuring that we do continually improve. We look to ways where we can continually learn and take action and make improvements to improve care for patients, but also improve colleague experience. And that continues with some of the focused cultural work around ensuring that the organisation feels a safe and trusted place to work. And that's really taking action now, and we're doing a self-assessment with an independent support from our local academic science network. So those are just some of the key things I wanted to highlight. And my final thing was with regards recognising colleagues' tiredness and fatigue right now. And again, as we do our engagement, particularly over the next number of weeks, we'll be paying continued attention to that, to listen and to learn and look at ways that we can make things better for colleagues. So those were things I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Claire,
I think Manjeet had a
question. Manjeet, got a question on this part?
Hi, can you hear me? Thanks. Thanks, Emma. It was really positive, reassuring to see that we've been maintaining this, considering the challenges we're facing with our workforce capacity. And so thanks to everyone. And it's good to see these regular feedbacks. I agree with you on what you were saying about that positive learning culture and how we're seeing those improvements. My key question was, can we look at more assurance, maybe through People Committee, at leadership particularly and their role? Because, you know, we know that whilst we're making a lot of improvements, there are those inconsistencies in pockets now. And if we can see more about the leadership in terms of role modelling those behaviours, the good behaviours we certainly see in some of the videos and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Manji. Yes, we have scheduled in for our People, Culture and Improvement Committee a focused assurance report with regards to leadership, whether that's development of our leaders, but also the current experience of colleagues from our leaders and line managers. And we're working closely also with key partners, such as our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, our HR business partners and divisions. So that will be a very collaborative report that will be going to the committee, and I do believe it's scheduled for December.
And just as feedback to all of the executive colleagues, I've fed this back to Ned. I was involved in my monthly consultant recruitment, and it was so positive yesterday to see from all the candidates that display of the values, modelling that positive team working and learning and improvement culture. It was just so positive to see that. So if you could feed that back to you know all the colleagues concerned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will do. Thank you, Manji. And similarly with the maturity matrix around being a learning organisation, equally that will be feeding in to the People, Culture and Improvement Committee, so we can monitor our developments throughout our ambition. So thank you, and I shall certainly feed that back, Manji.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So continuing the theme of people and culture, I'll hand over to Claire Teeney, our Director of People.
Thanks, Paul. Just a couple of things for me to highlight to the board. So the appraisal levels and mandatory training levels are slightly down, but actually that was known and was forecast, and it's because we have stood down some asks of colleagues because of the impacts that we've got on wider capacity issues. So there is a programme of recovery around that. In terms of overall capacity, that's the biggest thing that I just want to flag. So we are slightly higher than normal on sickness absence. That's because of colleagues that are absent with non-COVID sickness and actual COVID sickness. And then on top of that, we've got an increased number of colleagues out of the business because of reasons of needing to isolate, for example. So that takes us over and above what we would normally be operating at this time of the year. I think I also want to flag, because it's not evident from the reports, that on top of that our capacity has been further compounded because it's at this time of year when colleagues are taking much needed annual leave, and whilst it's really important that people do, the impact of that on already higher than normal absence rates is that we've got an overall greater impact on the capacity available to us in the hospital, as what has been running alongside what has been a busier time of the year than we would normally expect through the summer. So that's what I want to flag. And it is to say as well that we are putting in what support we can for colleagues around their health and well-being, but that's not to underestimate the impact on people's fatigue, and it is a concern to us and something that we're very conscious of as executives, particularly experiencing this at this time of the year ahead of what is going into the winter. So I just want to cite people on that, but just to assure people that we do understand the issues and we will be doing what we can to support where we can. That's all I wanted to add in. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you very much. I don't think we've got any specific any more questions from Ned's for this section, but thank you both for updating us and providing that reassurance. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to our domain of quality care, and I'm handing over to Julie Hogg, our Chief Nurse.
Thank you, Paul. So we had another stable month in August. There are just a few things to update on. So falls in August did increase again to 7.32. We did see an increase in the number of COVID patients in our hospital, and Simon will talk to you later around some of the operational challenges, but we saw an increase in falls in ED, and some of that is attributed to just the sheer volume of patients in the emergency department. There is a focused piece of work going on with the urgent and emergency care division, and they are making good progress. The quality committee have reviewed our detailed action plan to reduce the falls rate, and were assured by the actions and presentation that they received. For C. diff, unfortunately, this has increased again, and we're now getting regional support to reduce our C. diff rates. We've found some lapses in care in relation to antibiotic prescribing, and we've got support from the regional chief pharmacist for that piece of work, and there's a programme of education that's rolling out across the medical workforce over the coming months. Again, there were some sampling delays where actually patients were admitted with diarrhoea, but the sampling didn't happen until they were post 48 hours in the organisation. We also had some cleaning issues, so the UV machine was broken, and there was an issue with the new HPV machines. Both of those are now back in use, but we did have a period without either of those, and we had to resort to bleach and steam cleans. 7 patients have had a recurrence of their C. diff in months, so that explains some of the spike that you're seeing. Again, quality committee reviewed a deep dive of our C. diff and our plan to address this, and we'll continue to keep a close eye on our progress. For VTE, risk assessment and prophylaxis, we've gone back to the paper-based collation. You'll note that this is quite a labour-intensive process that's led by our governance support unit. In August, we had to redeploy more staff to the critical care unit because of the rise in numbers, and so this meant we redeployed from the GSU again. So the slight reduction is attributable to the reduced support from the GSU. There are plans for the team to go and speak with the medical managers later this month. Complaints remain in amber, although it is a stable picture, and we're back up to our pre-COVID case baseline. The complaints service has moved into the governance support unit to try and align complaints and incidents so that we can embed learning from both. We've got the pilot of the clinical first contact commencing both within the medicine division and within women's and children's, and we are confident that we'll be able to resolve some of those with a clinical first contact. For the ED friends and family test, you'll note that we have consistently been below the baseline, below the threshold for this across the year. We continue to have technical issues with the response rate, and the teams are working with the provider to try and resolve that. The recommendation rate, if you look nationally, is significantly lower than the threshold that we have on our SOF. We've taken a proposal following a deep dive through the Nursing, Midwifery and AHP Committee and the Quality Committee, and we are recommending that the threshold for this metric is lowered to 90%. It does still give us a stretch target, because if you look nationally, the national recommendation rate is around 78%, so Sherwood would still be performing significantly better, but we feel that the current recommendation rate is aspirational and not achievable. So we're seeking board support for that. The final exception on the report relates to cardiac arrest. We remain within the national benchmark between 1 to 1.5. All of the cardiac arrests are being reviewed, and there have been no lapses in care or missed opportunities within the arrests that occurred in August. Happy to take any questions on any of those.
Thanks, Julie. We've got a comment first of all from Barbara and then Andy.
Yes, thanks very much. It was really just to provide assurance to colleagues around the at the board that we did, as Julie say, spent some time at the last quality committee going through both the falls and the C. diff improvement plan, just to make sure that we really understood what was happening and that we had a realistic grip on it and understood how we could make those improvements. And we were assured by that work.
Thank you, Barbara. That's very helpful. Andy.
Julie, so you point out in the falls report, in the exception report, that the move is towards increasing mobility and ending PJ paralysis, which I'm sure is absolutely right. Quite a few falls are not actual falls. It's where somebody's with a patient and we lower them to the floor or whatever. And I just wondered, can we pick that out in our data? Because obviously the move towards greater mobility is going to continue. So in a sense, they are falls, but they're not the controlled falls. So can we distinguish?
So the team are looking at this, and I think if there's board support for us to separate those two out, we can certainly do that and report both metrics. I think that would be really helpful if there's support to do that.
Yeah, and clinically, I would have thought that was sensible from my viewpoint. I don't know what others think.
I think that sounds sensible. I know that we've gone around this issue a few times over the years, looking at the falls rate and trying to understand what is meant by a fall, so that we can actually determine the different severities of what we're looking at. So I think that would be helpful insight into the data, and looking at the comments that are coming through from colleagues, they support that position too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Back to Paul again, I think.
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to Julie's request for board approval for the change in the threshold around the friends and family test. And there was a request by Julie there for the board to approve that. It's been agreed, been discussed and agreed by the exec team. So Julie just asked for board approval.
Okay, so I'm asking colleagues to just indicate in the chat room, and I'm seeing the requests coming in are approving it. So thank you, Julie.
Thanks very much.
Paul, back to you.
Yep, thank you. So in our domain of timely care, I'm handing over to Simon Barton, the Chief Operating Officer.
Simon's got a problem with his computer. He's just having to reboot. I don't know if you want to do finance, maybe.
Let's move over to best value care if Rich is still with us, and Rich Mills, our acting CFO.
You're on mute though, Rich. We still can't hear you. I assume I can't hear you. I assume nobody else can.
No, I can't hear him.
No, I can't either.
Okay, comms, have you got him muted in the system somewhere?
He's not muted, maybe his headphones.
Try that. Can you hear him?
I can hear you, Julie. You're on Julie's now.
Yeah. Sorry. It says I'm unmuted on mine, but for some reason it's in that camera. So.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, it said I was unmuted, but for some reason, obviously I was. So for the month of August, the trust reported a small deficit of 53,000, which is an adverse variance to plan, but in line with what we'd forecast. And that brings us to a year-to-date deficit now of 235,000. This compares favourably to the year-to-date plan by 424,000. For interest, in the month of August, we spent 36.02 million. And of that, that included costs relating to the management of COVID-19, totaling 900,000, and costs relating to the COVID-19 vaccination programme, totaling 1.82 million, with offsetting income assumed. For the half-one period, which covers April to September 2021, our forecast remains at a deficit of 1.3 million, and this reflects the impact of a threshold change by NHS England and NHS Improvement on the threshold for earning additional income from elective recovery. Capital expenditure for August totaled 1.95 million, which is 800,000 more than planned. Delays to the ED resource and Mansfield Community Hospital schemes mean that the year-to-date capital expenditure is 1.16 lower than planned. Finally, our closing cash position for the month was 2.5 million higher than planned at 13.7 million, and this reflected the receipt of ERF and COVID-19 vaccination programme income in the month of August.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Emma, are you coming back in on this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I may, thank you. I just wanted
if
to
you want to both come in and then there may be further questions.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to further add to our report on best value with regards to our delivery against transformation and efficiency. So it's just to confirm that at month 5 we have delivered against plan the additional savings that we forecasted for the first half of the year, which is up to the 30th of September, and the forecasted delivery continues to remain on plan. And then similarly, we'll be looking at H2 as a new planning guidance was released next Thursday with regards to the latter half of the year in terms of transformation and efficiency. So I just wanted to confirm that and our position. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks very much. While other colleagues are thinking about questions, Rich, perhaps I can ask you to outline a little bit more on the lower than planned capital expenditure. Now, you outlined that as being partly due to delays in some of the projects. What assurance can you give to the board that we will be back on track on some of those areas?
Correct, yeah. So it's delays in terms of the estates, unforeseen delays that we've had on both of those, which are quite large scale projects. So Ben Widdowson, our director of estates, is working closely with colleagues, that PFI provider, to expedite those works, and we're clearly working to get that back on track towards the end of the year. We've within our planning for the second half of the year, we've accounted for the delays at Mansfield Community and got alternative plans in place for that capacity over the winter period.
Okay, thank you. Graham, you wanted to come in on that issue.
Yeah, I think Richard summarised it well. It has been difficult getting things moving with the PFI provider on a lot of our capital schemes, and it's something that I know Ben is working actively on, and we're doing that at quite a senior level as well to see if we can try and put things into a smoother way of working going forward. I wouldn't say we're there yet, but I think there is an acceptance on all parts that we need to do something, and we are starting to see a degree of movement. So hopefully we can continue to push that, and as Rich says, we can try and get back towards where we want to be by the end of the year.
Great. Thank you very much. I haven't got any other questions, so thanks, Rich, for your first performance as Interim Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. I'll learn how to use the mute button for next time.
Okay, brilliant basics, remember. We might need to return to some of that on our on some of these comms points. Back to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. You can see Simon on screen. So obviously Simon, Simon's the Chief Operating Officer, and we'll update on Untitled Care.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, apologies for that. Lost my internet connection. So I'll start with emergency care. Similar position to last month, although a higher national ranking at 86%. We were 5th in the NHS. I think that just shows how challenged emergency care is across the NHS at the moment. Our ambulance turnaround remains the best in the EMAS area, and that's really positive because in the planning guidance for H2, that's identified as probably the key standard around emergency care. It's a safe turnaround of ambulances. Similar issues, so high demand into ED, high demand into PC24. and they're doing admirably to try and cope with that. But they are having quite a few patients who are waiting over 4 hours. I think on the whole, we're keeping crowding under control, and that's helping us with the ambulance turnaround. To be aware that of the issues, and there's an exception reporting around delays to getting patients into home care. I think there's been a lot of conversations around that at the most senior level that Paul has been involved with ICS CEOs. I did see a plan around that yesterday for the first time around how we might mitigate some of that over winter, so that's quite promising, and we need to continue to work on that over the coming months. We've fully had the expanded ED handed over now from an estate's perspective, so Resus is fantastic, and has got 5 extra cubicles and a whole new setup, and I think will provide a really good area for our colleagues to work in, and also for our sickest patients on arrival. We've also recreated Pediatric Ed. Some colleagues will be aware that during the main bits of the pandemic, Pediatric Ed was used as red majors for COVID positive patients, and that did compromise some of the physical capacity within the minors area, and so we had a bit more crowding than we would have liked in minors, but we've reinstated Pediatric Ed now, and hopefully that will be a positive move. So I think emergency care is pretty stable. September was a very difficult month, and we've asked for a deep dive from the UEC division into some of the reasons for that. We know a lot of it was skewed at the beginning of September, and you will receive my briefing note about that first week in September, which was enormously difficult, both from an acuity and an exit block situation. But I'll pause for any questions on emergency care.
Thanks, Simon. Got a question from Barbara.
Thanks very much. It's probably as much a question for some of the other areas it is for emergency care, really, Simon, if I'm honest. It's more just about the increasing emphasis being put on inequalities. And I wondered whether some of this data, so including, you know, what you've just been talking about, has been cut to look at the inequalities dimension within there?
It hasn't, Barbara, no, not yet. So we have, as you've seen, we have done some of that work with the waiting lists, and that's been identified as the priority area. Within the planning guidance, we will have to report some of this data by deprivation and by ethnicity to the board in future. So I think that as we go through the next 6 months, that data will become more available to the board, and you'll be able to see it. I'm not quite sure in my head at the moment what that would look like and what it would mean. So I think there is still some work to do around this. I've also got a few concerns about data quality in that area. So I've asked internal audit whether that's an area that they could have a look at in terms of our data quality around this. So I would expect over the next 6 months, as per the planning guidance, you start to see this fleshed out a little bit more around some of the levelling up areas that we need to work on.
That would be great, Simon. I guess the first step is having an understanding of the profile of inequalities before we can kind of understand what interventions need to happen to address them. So yeah, if data quality is part of that, that's an important thing to get to grips with. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Barbara.
Okay, while we're just seeing if there's other questions coming through, Simon, perhaps you can just update again on the waiting for cancer treatment. Well aware that there was some issue around chemotherapy being provided, and that's now been solved, and our patients are not delayed in any of those. So is some of this that we're seeing in terms of the treatment reflected in the figures that you've got?
So in terms of cancer care, I think we're sort of in a steady state. So the average wait for treatment is about 60 days. but you'll see from the pack that the backlog isn't where we it's further away than our original trajectory. There's a few reasons for that. Firstly, our diagnostic pathway, which we always know has been challenged. Second, Nottingham's ability to A, operate, and B, provide oncology has been an issue around. That's about a third of the problem. I think just on the lingering on the oncology issue, I think we work quite well as a system to try and mitigate some of that, and I think that's what we need to see more of, particularly around cancer. Because Nottinghamshire is one cancer service, we shouldn't be seeing it as two separate cancer services. So we did a lot of work to see where we could support Nottingham, both for our patients and for their patients, to ensure that they were getting timely chemotherapy. Although I do think a few patients from Nottingham were delayed in that, but they are ultimately going to get that care. And then the other aspect is demand, and as you can see from the chart within the pack, we continue to see a very high level of demand, which isn't necessarily leading to more diagnosis of cancers. And I do think between us, NUH, and primary care, there is a conversation to be had about, what do we do about this, and really to get underneath the data and over the next few months come up with a plan, if there is one to be had, around cancer demand and whether patients are being put on 2-week waits, because actually the GP now has got the option between a 2-week wait or quite a long wait, and is there a middle ground there that they would find useful. I think going back to sort of like the original thing around the 2 to 3 year sort of workforce strategy, this is what we need from a capacity plan as well. So, later on we'll talk about the winter plan or the H2 capacity plan, and we're planning our capacity very much on an annual basis, and I think we need to have a more strategic view in that area. I think the average weights remain stable. We continue to review patients in the backlog as to their safety, and there aren't lots of safety concerns that are coming out of that. So I think probably the time to treatment isn't where we want it, but I think it's probably safe.
Thank you, and that's really helpful. And obviously we're aware that this week we've extended our diagnostics capacity with the opening of the new hub, and that will no doubt support some of the things that you're doing in that.
Yeah, that will help, and I think there are some other areas like in breast cancer really improving. They had times where they struggled during the pandemic to keep going, but they're really improving their waiting times back to where they were before the pandemic now. As we've reported before, lower GI remains the most challenged pathway around the volume of patients that are coming in, and endoscopy will really help with that as well. There is a reforecast there though, Chair, and I don't expect us at the moment, to be hitting that trajectory while demand remains high. I expect us to be maintaining where we are against that reforecast at this present time, and I think that makes the safety work that we do on the patients in the backlog even more important, to give the board assurance that whilst we might not be getting the waiting times where we want them to be in the short term, that those waiting times is providing safe care.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Simon. And I think that concludes the discussion on the single oversight framework. And I don't have any further questions. So if I can move on then to Julie, who's going to take us through the temporary reduction in home births paper. Julie.
Thank you. I think I'd like to start off by saying this is not where we want to be, and we don't underestimate the impact that this change that we're proposing will have on women that are under our care. So currently we provide home births to about 6 women per month, and to do that we need 2 midwives on call 24/7 to be available as and when. At the moment we've got a workforce loss within our community midwifery service of 35%. and it is just proven impossible to consistently have 2 community midwives on call 24/7. We have been trying to manage this, but in reality, we have nights where we're unable to cover it, and so we're letting women know at very short notice that we can't provide a home birth cover. And so we think the most honest thing to do is to be open and honest about our inability to cover the home birth service consistently, and to let women know proactively that we're unable to provide this service overnight. So we are recommending that the board supports the suspension of the home birth service overnight. We will continue to provide the service in the daytime, but we will make sure that women know, should they labour into the night, we will have to transfer them into the hospital. So what we're recommending is a 3-month suspension of the service. We will personally contact all women who are booked for a home birth and develop an individualised plan for them so they know what to expect when they go into labour. We will continue to actively recruit to our community midwifery roles, and we've got a number of vehicles for doing that. We're also going to review our community service provision and look at whether we can use other roles to support the midwives, such as the Band 3 support worker role. We have also contacted some retired midwives to see if they will come and give us some support within clinics, so that then releases our community midwives to provide the home birth cover. And we're also working really closely with the Maternity Voices Partnership so that they can help us to support women through this change. We have had support from the CCG to make this change, and also from the regional chief midwife. Whilst it's a difficult position to be in, unfortunately we aren't alone in this, so there are a number of other organisations around us that have had to make this change as well. So I'm seeking board support to suspend the service for a period of 3 months, and we'll come back in early December with an update to board on how we're progressing with recruiting to the vacancies.
Thank you, Julie. Let's start with a question from Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I fully appreciate and understand the situation we're in. Just really for a question for clarity, really. You mentioned that the home births at night, and that you may wish to transfer, or may require to transfer a pregnant woman to the hospital if that's commenced. Is there any risk in that?
So there is a risk that somebody might deliver en route, and that wouldn't be a birth experience that we'd want for them. But I think if someone was in advanced labour, we wouldn't move them. But I think if we are looking at midwives being out for the whole night, we will have to make the transfer. So I think it's more of an experience than a safety issue.
Okay, fine, thank you.
I suppose the question to ask then is, why did you decide to only recommend suspension of overnight home births and not all home births? Would that have been a safer option?
I don't think so. I don't think there are safety risks with doing this. I think that we have a duty to offer women a choice where we can, and we can provide a service in the day, and there are women that will labour in the day, so we're trying to facilitate choice whilst balancing the risk of not being able to provide the service 24/7. So we think this is it's a happy medium, and some women will choose not to have a home birth on the basis that actually they may get transferred in.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, but I'd like the board members to indicate whether or not they approve this change. Yeah, I think that the general view is obviously it's not something we would want to be doing, but it's necessary and we understand the circumstances. So you have support from the board for the change that you're proposing. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are moving then over to Simon, I think. Are you leading on this next paper on the standard self-assessment?
I am, Chair, thank you. My picture's frozen there by a little bit, so I'll just turn my camera off. That's okay for the moment.
We're having some technical problems this time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll do it with my camera off. Apologies. This is just for the board's overview of our emergency planning course standard self-assessment. We have a self-assessment and then an external assessment once a year around where we are against our emergency planning course standards. Historically, we have done pretty well in this area. You can see there that we've the past few years the process was suspended during COVID, the first round of the pandemic, but the 2 years before that we were substantially compliant on all the standards. And there's a self-assessment been undertaken, and we are fully compliant with 47 out of 49 standards. There are 2 standards where we aren't compliant at this time, which are related to CBRN. And some of that is around training, which actions are in place to complete that by the end of October. And some of that is about additional policy around risk assessment in this area. So Mark Stone, who leads a lot of this work, will have that complete as well by the end of October. So by the end of October, we expect to be fully compliant. And then when we're visited by NHS England to assess where we are against these standards, we expect to be substantially compliant again. So really it has to come to the board for the board's oversight, and it's there for assurance, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from board members, Simon, so I think they are obviously happy and assured by the paper and by what you've said, so thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on then to the committees. Audit and Assurance. Graham.
Thanks, Claire. I'll take the paper as read, but just highlight a couple of points from it. First of all, internal audit. It's difficult to make sure we are able to deliver our programme, and there have been challenges as a consequence of COVID. Obviously, one of the things we're going to start tracking a little bit more than we have to date is some of the areas like making sure we get timely responses on terms of reference, and also on draft papers. So really just asking our executive colleagues to pass on and the importance of doing those timely responses back on those. We're trying to do that at a 10-day deadline, which hopefully will give more than sufficient time, but it's about making sure we're able to deliver the programme. I also particularly want to highlight procurement and the work that procurement have done, especially on the wider work they've delivered across both working collaboratively, and they're a good example of some of the things that we can do collaboratively both with NUH but also more particularly with the Health Trust. And one particular extra bit in that was the help they have delivered with PPE to a number of care homes where they struggled to get sufficient delivery, and that really, I think, made a big difference and was helpful. And then the final bit was around register of interests. And the work that's ongoing on that. We tried to get 1 or 2 non-respondees to the meeting, audit committee meeting. Unfortunately, they didn't attend, so I'm going to follow that up individually, but happy to take questions.
I don't see any questions there, Graham. Thank you very much for that. So thank you for that assurance.
Okay,
I know
I'm not sure what's going on with all the background.
I'm not sure what's going on with the presentation, but I know that that's a presentation that's coming shortly after we've concluded. So, Finance Committee.
I'm afraid you're stuck with me again.
I was going to say, Graham, I just wanted to check you're going to do this, aren't you?
I'm going to pick this one up as well in Neil's absence.
Thank you.
I think Rich highlighted all the main elements in terms of our position at month 5 and H1, and we recognise we're actually in a good position, but we do have this particular issue with the 1.3 million, which is as a consequence of the moving the thresholds on ERF. One bit just really more for everybody's awareness as much as anything else on any staffing shortage, but particularly highlighting COVID related staff absences. 0.5% of our reduction in our workforce due to absence has an effect of £150,000 cost to us per month. So it's quite substantial. Something we always need to bear in mind, I think, a little bit going forward. A couple of other bits to highlight. FIP, which Emma mentioned earlier too. We'll need to relook that in light of having the guidance out on H2. Initially, we were showing a gap, but there's work being done to close that gap. The BAF, really, because of the position we've been in and how we've been managing it going forward, we had a discussion around this, and our recommendation is that we reduce the consequence side of it from very high to high. So that will bring it more in line with our tolerable risk level. And then finally, again, for awareness more than anything else, we put an expression of interest into the new hospital scheme and bid. In reality, how well we do is difficult to say, because there are only 8 hospitals going to be successful in this, and I'm aware that there are 127 bids. That said, the important bit for me is it gets it out there. It starts to do that communication. It raises awareness of our need for new theatres and new ICU. So it's really good to see that it's gone in, and we'll await to see what the long listing process comes out with, which I don't think is now expected to be heard until December, January, but it will come through. But happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Graham. I don't see any questions in that, but that's excellent. Thank you. So we're moving on now to Quality Committee. Barbara, you're going to lead on this.
I am, thank you. So as already mentioned earlier in today's meeting, we received 2 sort of deep dives, further investigations into the C. difficile position and falls, both of which are at variance to where we'd hoped to be, and we gained assurance around the plans for improvement on both of those, so that was good. We received and approved the nursing, midwifery and AHP strategy, which aligns really nicely with the Trust's overall strategy and really demonstrates how this particular part of our workforce supports the overall strategy. We received the end of life care annual report. There's been a lot of changes happening around end of life. In many ways, those changes expedited because of the COVID challenge that we've had, to which the end of life team and the Trust as a whole have made some really quite rapid changes, and there are lots of improvements that have been made that will now be embedded going forward. Really good. And finally, we wanted to highlight what's happening around understanding the harms primarily associated with the impact from COVID-19. And there are a number of particular areas that I wanted to draw the board's attention to. So the medical examiner has highlighted that we're seeing more cancer deaths than we might have done in a similar period of time pre-COVID. Many of these patients do not have notes from Sherwood Forest Hospital Trust showing that we've been part of any multidisciplinary team, so they perhaps weren't receiving their cancer care from us, but have ended up with us towards the end of life. So there's some work to understand what's going on under that. 52-week waits. There's a small team that constantly are looking at those patients who have those extended waits and seeking to reprioritise where appropriate and have a flagging system so they get reviewed in a timely way to avoid any sustained harm on that front. And that's being led by a clinical nurse specialist, as I say, in a small team. There are also issues around nosocomial infections, so infections that have happened, healthcare required infections might be another term that people are familiar with, primarily around COVID. And we have been made aware of continued challenges around ophthalmology, and so we've asked for some more detailed work to take place to understand the impact of the delays within the ophthalmology waiting list. So really trying to get some assurance around our understanding of the processes and the rigour associated with the impact of COVID on our patient population. They were the main things to highlight from the report. So I'm not sure if colleagues have any other questions.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and for providing that assurance. I don't see any other questions, and I think we've probably covered some of those points in discussion earlier today as well. So thank you for that. Okay, and I think now we'll have a presentation on the outstanding service within our trust, which is a video, I believe, on the endoscopy clinics and CT scanners. So hopefully that can play now.
Hello, my name's Ian and I'm the matron for endoscopy here at Sherwood Forest Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. I'm standing in our new mobile endoscopy unit which is open today. This means that with the accelerator funding we got from the government, we are able to see our patients more quickly and hopefully diagnose cancer and get patients treated more quickly on the cancer pathway. We were one of only 12 trusts in the country to be given this money, and we're very proud that we've got this unit we've been waiting for about 4 years. This should mean that our patients get extremely good treatment as we give in our main endoscopy unit, and it means that our community can receive its diagnosis and treatment in a much more timely manner. Our cancer waiting times are set by the government and we see patients on a 2-week wait pathway. Having this extra mobile endoscopy unit will mean that we can see our patients easily within the 2-week pathway and they can move on to get further treatment. To get this unit has meant a lot of work for a lot of people. A lot of the nurses have been involved, particularly the department leader. We're very grateful to Skanska for their enabling works, which has meant we can get the unit up and running in a very timely manner. It's a very exciting project and we're very proud here at Kings Mill to be able to have a new endoscopy unit.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Sentence, I'm Radiography Services Manager. The reason we've got the new relocatable CT scanner in the car park is due really to the increase in demand that we've had for CT. Over the last year it's about 25% more than previous years, and that's coming from all areas of our referrals. The scanners in the main department are so busy doing inpatients and ED that we need this scanner for our outpatient work. The outpatient work that we're doing on the scanner is all types, so it's mainly patients that are looking for a diagnosis that could be query cancer, patients that have had cancer treatments and are having follow-up scans to monitor that. We can do about 25 patients a day plus, depending on the type of examination, and that is really going to give us, 600 plus patients a week a month, that we can start to get our waiting list back in a much better controlled manner for our patients, because we know, one, those that are query cancers are really worried, and we don't want those to wait longer than the 2 weeks that is the national standard. So this scanner is also quite a nice patient experience compared to the mobiles that we've had before, because they've been ones that have had, they're like a mobile van on wheels, so they're like a lorry. They're smaller, they've got steps and lifts. This is a beautiful, spacious, like being inside a normal department. It's got a cannulation room, it's got space for patients to wait, it's got a lovely large scanning room, so it gets rid of any issues around patients feeling claustrophobic or in a lorry. It's a really nice scanner, and we're actually delighted to have it. I think, yeah, together CT and endoscopy, we'll be able to see an extra 800 patients a month. I think from a community perspective, we don't want anybody waiting longer than they should for their scans, and because we've got a little bit behind with the extra volume coming through, our patients need that service. We need to be looking after them the best that we can, and this is a new opportunity for us to get back on track to the service that we've always given.
That's a really positive video to have at the end of a board meeting, to show the progress that's being made, the investment that's being made in the trust, and also what that means for our patients, but also our staff, who, as you can tell from those who appeared on that video, they are so keen to provide better services to patients and to do so in a timely way. So that's a really, really good video. Thank you to those who put that together. Paul, I saw you on the video, and you were obviously there for the opening. So would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. So I echo what you've just said, Claire. Absolutely, yeah, great facilities for patients, and staff are so pleased and proud that we were opening them, and I was pleased and proud that on my first formal day of being interim CEO, my first task was to cut that ribbon on the new endoscopy facility, and something that was picked up in that on the day, but also in the presentation that we've just seen. We're referring to these facilities as being mobile. They're far from mobile. They may be temporary in nature, but they're certainly not mobile. The facilities are second to none. They look great, and I'm sure they give a really good patient experience. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Great. So as we come towards the end of our public board meeting today, we're just thinking now about the communications to the wider organisation. I know that Lorna's not able to join us today. So, Paul, have you got any thoughts on the communications that we want to?
I've got a little list. I've got a little list. Shall I share my list? So I thought we need to recognise your appointment and the changes in the interim arrangements around Chief Executive and Chief Financial Officer, and recognition that our staff are under intense pressure, and we thank them for their effort and commitments. We welcome the strategic workforce plan and the research strategy update, and received a very powerful update on reflection on patient story on Never events. We agreed a temporary suspension or reduction in our home birth service for 3 months, and we welcome the additional diagnostic testing facilities for CT and endoscopy.
I think that's a very good list, and good communications to our staff and to our team. So thank you for that. Now, I think I'm just looking to see whether or not we've got any questions from members of the public. So first of all, we haven't got any other business. I've certainly not been informed of any other business. And obviously for a date of next meeting, we'll be returning in November, and the first Thursday of November. So I'm going to officially close the meeting while we just check if there's been any other questions that have come in from the public. Shirley.
Yeah, we've had one question, Claire. It says, on the workforce plan, will you also be working with local schools to raise awareness and showcase the vast range of career opportunities that exist? So I think that's about Claire's paper earlier on.
Sure. Claire, would you like to pick that up?
Yeah, the answer to that, Shirley, is yes, and we already do through the Care for Knots programme that we've got running across Nottinghamshire and that we host at Sherwood Forest. There is more work for us to do. Unfortunately, some of those opportunities during the pandemic around people being able to access work experience, for example, was stood down, but we're in a position now where we will be liaising again directly back with the schools, and it will certainly feature as part of our ongoing work quite heavily.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know we had a good discussion on some of those wider issues anyway. So hopefully our members of the public feel assured that we are looking at this matter and picking up on those points. I'm going to now close the meeting and to read the formal statement that has to be read. In accordance with Section 1, Part 2 of Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, members of the board are invited to resolve that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest. So can I thank all my colleagues for joining in this public board meeting. We're going to close the meeting and we will reconvene at 12:30 for the second part of our meeting. Thank you very much.